It was one of those days when I got home late. Again. The house was uncharacteristically dark and quiet. If I didn't get home on time, Alan would turn on all the lights and prepare dinner for our daughter Catherine. I parked next to Alan's empty spot, thinking they must have gone out to dinner. I was starving and hoped that they would bring something home to eat. I entered the house, put my things in the hallway, and headed to our bedroom to change into something more casual. Now I could relax and wait for their return. My thoughts went back to the 2 hours I had just spent with Luca. Damn, this guy knows how to rock my world. Unlike Luca, Alan takes his time with me and turns me on until I'm out of control and asking for more. On the other hand, the mischief that Luca comes up with makes me stay with him for hours without regret. I know I'm being selfish. I want them both in my life. I had no intention of cheating on my husband for 5 years. The opportunity just presented itself during a bachelorette party. Luca continued to flirt with me and bought me drinks. That night, I found myself in a parking lot, allowing him to put me in the back seat of his SUV. This one-time indiscretion began a continuous series of offenses, usually once, but sometimes twice a week. I never ignored Alan's needs. In fact, I think I've gotten better dating both of them. I've been a happy girl for the last 4 months. I got everything I wanted. No, everything I deserved. I convinced myself that even Alan would go to extreme lengths if a young beauty wanted him on a regular basis. I immediately regretted this thought. I knew Alan would never risk his family for a cheap thrill. This made me rethink for the 100th time what I was doing, and for the 100th time I decided to end things with Luca. I needed to focus on my family. I was ready to have my own child. I know that Alan would like to have another child with me. We talked about it all the time, but every time I was ready to make it a reality, something blocked me. Lately, it's been Luke. I can never think about having a baby with Alan without thinking about Catherine. Catherine is a special little girl, but I'm just her stepmother. Her mother, Lily, died after giving birth due to some undetected medical complications. Sadness tore through me every time I thought about it. Lily would have been so proud of her little girl and the way Alan raised her, but Lily wasn't here to see it. I'm so proud of how Alan stepped up and made Catherine the center of his life. This is one of the many qualities that attracted me to him in the first place. I also knew that if Lily had not died, he would be with her today. This is his love. I hung my work clothes in our dry cleaning closet and reminded myself to grab them the next time I went to the mall. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a glass of wine, and headed into the office to relax until my loved ones returned home. Something on the table caught my attention. It took me a few moments to realize what I was looking at. My throat tightened, and I instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Holding a cheap printed photograph of Luca and me in my hands, I looked at a pair of ornate arcs. I recognized them immediately, the 2 halves of Alan's wedding ring. I instinctively reached for the same ring on my finger. The black tungsten base glittered strangely along its cut edge. The koa wood and mother-of-pearl inlay were chipped where the grinder split Alan's treasure in 2. Why did he have to do this? We had our rings custom-made for our wedding. The koa wood symbolized Hawaii, and the shell inlay reflected our love for the ocean. I remember Alan putting a ring on my finger during our beach vows. It was the greatest day of my life. Suddenly, it dawned on me that I had thrown away everything I had dreamed of just for the sake of good sex. Alan's ring was half a size larger than his normal size, so he could fit it around his enlarged knuckle. As a machinist, he caught his glove on a spindle many years ago, and it left him with a constant reminder of why gloves should not be worn near turning equipment. I remembered how he had to lubricate his finger, and how painful it was for him to pull the ring onto his knuckle. But he insisted on wearing it. Now this did not bother him, since he never worked with turning equipment again. I knew deep down that Alan would never come back to me. I knew this because he joked that he would lose his finger before he even took off the ring. I think he found a way to remove it while keeping the finger intact. A post with 2 simple words was attached to the picture diagonally. "Call me." I plopped down in a chair. My eyes filled with tears. I realized that I was holding my breath and exhaled with a groan. How could I be so stupid? My chest felt tight, and it was hard to breathe as I sat there, staring at the grotesque photograph of a naked Luca lying on top of me. My face was clearly visible. My eyes were closed. I was enjoying it. A million thoughts raced through my head, but I couldn't seem to hold on to any of them. I couldn't imagine where Alan might have gone. He had no family. For the last 6.5 years, it was just the two of us in his life. We met while I was visiting my sister in Chicago. Our long-distance courtship lasted 8 months before Alan and his daughter came to live here with me. As Alan said, a good machinist can find work anywhere. He was right. It didn't take him long to find a well-paying job. 12 months later, we got married on a beautiful Hawaiian beach. I now knew that I was destined to spend the rest of my life without him and without Catherine. I stood up, wiped my tears with my sleeve, and reached into my purse for my phone, thinking, I'll never know how bad it is until I talk to him. I paced around the house, trying to work up enough courage to call my husband. I sipped my glass of wine, hoping that a little liquid courage would help me press the call button. Not ready to sit down, I continued my circles, stopping only to refill my glass a few times. I sat down at the table and stared at the two halves of his ring. I laid them out on the table. I lined them up to make them the perfect circle they once were, but the circle was incomplete. Alan removed a small wedge from one of the halves, so they would never be perfect again. I realized that the state of Alan's ring was also the state of my marriage, never to be whole again. I drank the rest of the wine. I pressed and held the speed dial button for Alan. His phone rang twice. Hello, Julie. I see you found my note. There was a slight tremor in his voice that told me he was looking forward to my call. I sat in silence, listening to the noise of the road before I squeaked, Hey, Alan. I paused briefly, and then poured out my soul to the only man I've ever truly loved. I'm so sorry, Alan. I screwed up so badly. Please forgive me. I know, Julie. I wish things had ended differently. What do you mean? Where the hell are you? It dawned on me that I could hear his truck honking in the background of our conversation. He was driving. We're on our way. We packed our things and hit the road. I don't see any reason to stay. Alan, we can fix this. I promise it was stupid. I love you. Only you. I felt myself overcome with emotion again, tears rolling down my cheeks. Julie, we already talked about this. This is the one thing I can never forgive. He paused for a second. I heard him take a deep breath. You chose him over us, Julie. We have nothing more to discuss. His statement was final. I couldn't believe my marriage was already over. Where are you? You need to come home so we can discuss this. I won't let you leave me like this. For a moment, I felt stronger knowing that Alan was a good man and never shied away from a discussion. I have no idea where we are. In the middle of nowhere, as far as I can tell. You will be served tomorrow. My attorney's name and number will appear on the paperwork. I have given him authority to negotiate the terms, and I will contact him from time to time. I don't need anything from you. We took everything we wanted with us. He was all businesslike. His tone was even. He pronounced every syllable clearly. What about Catherine? An 8-year-old girl needs her mother. This can't be good for her. I knew that I had it in my hands. I was ashamed to use our sweet daughter as a weapon against my principled man, but I was desperate. Stepmother. Now he was offended. He knew that I was the only mother Catherine had ever known. Remember, you decided not to adopt her because you were always there for us anyway. You decided not to make her your real daughter, Julie. How do you think Catherine feels after this? Not only did you break our vows, but you also broke the heart of a sweet little girl who desperately wanted to be your daughter. You only gave her a promise, not a commitment. You said you'd always be there for her, and now because of you, I can't let you keep that promise. You have no legal footing here, Julie. I had to put my phone away for a moment because my emotions were quickly escalating. I wasn't sure I could stop myself from sobbing. That was probably the cruelest thing Alan has ever said to me. If the fact that I was sitting alone in our house wasn't enough of an indication of how much I had offended this man, then the verbal slap certainly showed it. I saw how badly I had screwed up. I sucked in a breath, held it for a second, and tried to calm down. Alan, you know I love her. I couldn't love her more if she were my biological child, I muttered, stammering. Right now, any talk about how much you love us doesn't mean a damn thing to me. Is she listening to us? Panic rose in my chest at the thought that Catherine might overhear us talking about her. No, she sleeps in the back seat. We've been on the road for a long time. Where are you going, Alan? I knew that he had neither close relatives nor friends. His life was us, which never seemed to bother him. Alan focused on us and made sure we always had everything we needed. This was another reason why I loved him so much. I decided to try a different approach since this one didn't work. Please come home so we can talk about this. Please. I don't know where we're going yet. We just left. I can find a job anywhere. My lawyer has my demands. You don't have anything I want, Julie. I've known for 2 weeks now that you're cheating. I began planning my divorce as soon as the private investigator confirmed my suspicions. You were so absorbed in yourself and this idiot that you didn't even notice how I was slowly moving our things to our new apartment. We were heading there with the last of our things when I just didn't turn around. Instead, we got onto Old Highway 99 and just kept going. I'll think about how to get our things from the apartment later. I just can't stay in the same city with you two anymore. Damn, Julie, you definitely ruined everything. Alan interrupted his tirade. His voice became firm and loud. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter and more to the point. By the way, I canceled all our joint credit cards. I know you have a couple cards to your name, so I'm not worried about how you'll cope. In the end, you earn enough. I did withdraw several thousand from our joint account. I figure that, along with my credit cards, should help tide us over until we get settled somewhere. I'll leave you the rest of the money. I also signed my relinquishment of the house. It was yours before we met, and it didn't feel right to try to take any of that away from you. Divorce is complicated enough on its own. In any case, Alan was always fair in his relationships. What if I don't want to get a divorce? Now my breathing has calmed down a little. I was ready to play hard. How long have you been having sex with this guy? His voice lowered a little, and his tone became almost threatening. I thought about his question for a moment, instinctively wanting to lie. I was torn between being honest and trying to lure him back home. I had just discovered that he had known for 2 weeks, but I had no idea how much more he knew about my affair. I wouldn't want him to catch me in a lie and put an end to any communication. 4 months, it was a loud whisper. 4 months have passed, but I don't love him. In fact, I wanted to end it so we could have a baby. It wasn't a lie. I really wanted to have a child with him. I love you, Alan. I don't know what to do without you in my life. Please, come home. And it wasn't a lie. I can't, Julie. We cannot. I will never trust you again. And that's unfair to both of us. We would always live with a rope around our necks, waiting to be strung up by our own mistrust. Have you ever noticed that we haven't made love in over a month? No, that's not true. I may not have noticed you moving out, but I know it wasn't so. I exclaimed, thinking that I had not neglected Alan and his needs, although I had satisfied mine elsewhere. That's right. Go look at the kitchen calendar. I wrote it down. His tone was flat and indifferent again as he continued. You forgot to love me, Julie, while you gave everything you had to that asshole. The best thing you can do for all of us is to let us go. You are a smart, beautiful, and sexy woman. Look for your happiness elsewhere. The sobs escaped before I could stop them. I turned into a sobbing idiot. You are my happiness. I tried to say more, but I choked on my own saliva and dry gagging. Look, I should probably let you go. I need to find us a place where we can spend the night. His voice sounded sad, quiet, depressed. He could never bear to see me cry. I knew what it could do to him. Stay home tomorrow. I'll let the lawyer know so he can bring the documents home, okay? My brain was bursting with pain and anguish. I knew that I could no longer carry on a conversation. I was ravaged and slaughtered. Good, baby. We'll talk more later. Julie, I love you more than anything in the world. I thought that there are only 1 or 2 great loves in our lives. My first was Lily, and I almost died that night with her, but I knew I had to continue for Catherine's sake. You were my support. I will never find someone to love as much as you. Maybe that's why it hurts so damn much to know that you don't feel the same way about me. I heard his voice tremble with the emotions he shared with me. I love you. He said those last words, and then there was silence. I tried to answer, but the words came out as stutters and muffled sounds. I knew he was gone. The phone fell out of my hand and fell to the floor. I just stared at it, almost in a coma, then, staggering, I walked to the office, pulled the blanket over myself from the sofa, curled up on the sofa, and cried. I slept fitfully. When I woke up with a start, it took me a moment to realize that I was still on the couch. The watch told me that I had been there for several hours. I remembered my conversation with Alan. I felt the pain I caused him and how lost I felt, knowing he wouldn't come back to me. I drifted in and out of fitful sleep for several more hours. When I just couldn't do it anymore, I got up and made a cup of coffee. I saw that my phone was lying on the floor. I walked over and picked it up, resisting the urge to press the button to call Alan. I finished making coffee and sat back on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. The clock showed that it was a little after 6 in the morning. I decided not to resist anymore. I needed to hear his voice. Broken ring. Hello? It was not Alan's voice. It was clearly an elderly woman. The voice was rattling. Moving the phone away from my ear, I double-checked the contact. It was Alan's number. Is this Julie? Yes, who are you? I was stunned that someone else answered the phone, that she knew my name and sounded like she was expecting my call. She seemed kind. I'm Edith. A tall, handsome man handed me this phone last night and said that if I was lucky, the most beautiful woman in the world would call and talk to me. What? When? Who are you? It was a blow, but my feelings quickly recovered. Last night I was sitting at the bus stop when this big truck pulled up and stopped next to me. This man came out and asked me how the evening was and then asked if I had a phone. She hesitated for a second. Thinking that he wanted to call, I said that no, I don't need him, since I live on the street. He then pulled the phone out of his pocket, along with $50, and told me to eat dinner and make as many calls as I wanted, and if I was lucky, you would call me. I could no longer contain my emotions. I burst into tears again. Edith talked to me on the phone for an hour, comforting me. Then she said that the phone was beeping. It had a low battery indicator and she needed to go. He really left, didn't he, Edith? Yes, dear. I think that was his last connection with you. I'm really sorry. It was my fault. Can I call you again? Of course, dear. I have no one else to call back with. We separated and I sat there, breathing heavily and crying. My world has disappeared. I was left to fend for myself in my own personal hell. I called Edith every day, and each time we talked for a few minutes. I called about 2 weeks later and my heart broke again when I received the disconnect message. I think Alan turned off his phone. My last connection with Alan and Catherine was irrevocably severed. 3 years later, my private investigator finally found Alan. He lived in a small provincial town in Missouri. I dropped everything I was doing and flew. The next morning, I sat in front of the small diner where the private investigator said he had breakfast. I watched the same beat-up pickup truck pull into the parking lot. My handsome husband got out of his truck and walked into the building. I waited a few more minutes to ensure he was well settled and waited for my order before facing him. My mission was simple: do whatever it takes to get my family back. When I walked through the door, I saw him in a booth by the large bay window, completely engrossed in his phone. He didn't see me approach until I slid into the seat opposite him. Looking up, I saw surprise and fear on his face when he recognized me. "Oh, Julie, what are you doing here?" "I came for my husband. I would have come earlier, but you were hard to find." Obviously not hard enough. He sat and looked at me, then a smile appeared on his face. "It's so good to see you, baby. You look as beautiful as always. And you, dear husband, have not changed at all." I looked away from him for a second. Turning to him, I saw Catherine sitting next to him. "Oh, Catherine, Where did you come from? I smiled at my husband. Are you ready to come home? I heard a baby crying. Somewhere in the diner, a child was crying loudly, interrupting my reunion with the only man I had ever truly loved. Yes. My happy dream was cruelly interrupted. I woke up abruptly. Cold sweat covered my sleeping body. The persistent crying was real, and it was coming from the other end of the corridor. I slipped out of bed, trying not to disturb the sleeping man lying next to me. I made my way into the nursery and picked up our 5-month-old baby, rocking him in a soothing rhythm. I started rocking him to sleep, carried him out of the room and carried him down the corridor, stopping along the way to check on his older sister. She was sleeping peacefully in her bed. I stopped to close the master bedroom door and watched Dad sleep for a while. My son calmed down when I closed the door and went into the office. This happened several times a week. As he grew older, the pain often woke him up late at night. I leaned back on the arm of the sofa. My son lay on my chest, cuddled up to me, and fell asleep. I grabbed my iPad, opened Facebook, and hit the search bar. Victoria Aberdino. Key was first on the list. It should be so. I have searched for her profile many times in the past. Opening her page again, I saw that she had added a new photo. There she was with her 2 little boys smiling at the camera. Next to her was Alan's smiling face and the exuberant Catherine peeking over his shoulder, hanging on his neck. I looked at a happy family. Victoria's text wished her amazing husband and partner a happy 3rd anniversary. She extolled all his virtues and hailed him as both the best husband and the hero who had saved her life during the darkest period she had ever experienced. I studied Victoria's profile enough to find out the story after my private investigator discovered that Alan had remarried and to whom. Victoria's first husband died of a genetic heart disease at the age of 30, leaving her with 2 small boys. Alan, who worked in her uncle's machine shop, spent a lot of time with her and helped her through the grieving process, with which he was doubly familiar. He grieved both the death of his first wife and the loss of his second marriage. Somewhere along the way, they fell in love and got married a year later. A tear escaped and rolled down my cheek as my chest heaved, threatening to wake my little boy. Of course, I didn't want him to wake up his dad, Luca, who was sleeping in our room. I remembered how devastated I was when Alan and Catherine left, and how I struggled with the divorce until I found out I was pregnant. I didn't want to have an abortion and reluctantly let Alan and Catherine go. Apparently, my last date with Luca left me with a parting gift. She is now 4 years old and sleeps soundly in her room. Luke proposed marriage to me after my divorce was final. Afraid of being alone and not knowing what to do with the newborn, I accepted his offer. This was a little less than 5 years ago. Knowing that my Alan would never come back, I did the best I could in a bad situation. From then on, I was trapped in a spinning nightmare, unable to find a way to escape. I just keep going deeper. The last lump is drooling all over my tits. I remembered what Alan said. There are only 1 or 2 great loves in our lives. Looks like he got more than he bargained for. I was only given love once. I miss him every minute of every day. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.